Hey everybody, this is Princess Methodologies. Today I want to talk about a talk that Junot Diaz gave over here in the West Coast at Occidental College on September 22nd, this past Tuesday. It was kind of really exciting because he's usually mostly in the East Coast all the time. So he had given a talk at USC and the lines had, the RSVPs had sold out too. So it was free entrance, but everything had sold out. So I was like, oh, this is exciting. I can see him now in the West Coast here in California because he's usually just in the East Coast. So briefly, he gave two readings of This Is How You Lose Her and The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. Some main points of his talk were that he wanted to emphasize to everybody, and he kept mentioning that you need to be gentle and generous with yourself. And the reason he says that is that he feels that there's a lot of stressors that this youth has, in particular in this day and age. And I also see it too because I didn't necessarily experience that when I was growing up. But nowadays, the focus is if you don't get into the right job, the right career, the right college, etc., you're screwed. And he says you need to be gentle and generous with yourself. You're good enough as you are without all these X, Y, and Z things that happen in your life. You're worthy of life. You're unique as you are without any of these attachments that society imposes on you. So I thought that was a great message. Another thing was for activists. He just felt, especially with people of color, he felt it was important to have solidarity with each other, and that a lot of people unfortunately didn't have it, even as people of color, and that solidarity was a muscle that needed to be exercised, and that we always find ways to actually excuses not to do X, Y, and Z. And the thing was that, I'm actually guilty of that. I always find excuses, and so it got me thinking a lot. And another point, he mentioned a lot of other great things, but another main point that I thought was that he said because youth is very driven in terms of, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to get the right job, the right college, the right income to have the right standard of living, etc., etc. That this society devalues imagination and art, because art and imagination doesn't have any monetary value. Then if you can't immediately make money off of it, then you shouldn't do it, then forget it. And it was interesting, one of the people in the audience, a young man, asked him, well, what do you think of the fact that nerd is cool now? Because a lot of his books have a lot of that nerd, kind of that nerd aspect. And he said, nerd isn't cool now. It's just that capital has found a way to actually make money off of it. It isn't like suddenly these kids decided, even with the Star Wars franchise or Batman or Spider-Man, that they decided to put on a mask or and play around with it. He says just that they found out a way to make money off of that. And he wanted to emphasize, don't forget that, because this society, imagination and art don't have any value. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that actually puts you in touch with your higher self. Whether you do dance, whether you're creative, whether you're a writer, whether you're an artist, whether you're in music, any of those things puts you in touch with your higher self. And to me that makes a lot of sense because I'm writing my dissertation, and honestly that's how I feel. When I do danza, that's how I feel. When I go dancing, that's how I feel. And no other method kind of does that, for us. But he did say that again, that capital has found a way to make money off of that. But in any case, he did have a number of criticisms, and one of the criticisms, and actually the first question was, the first question was, what does he think about, or what are his thoughts about the misogyny that is found in his books? And one of the things that he said, and the response to this question, was that representation was not approbation. And he said at the end of the day, you took away from the novel whatever you needed to. You were the writer of the last chapter, so to speak, because everybody has a different take on the novels. And I sort of agree with that. I was thinking, yeah, that's true. But to me, it wasn't such a major issue, but for a lot of women in the audience, it was. And the reason, when I met some people before I went in, and then when we came back out, we had a mini sort of discussion of what everybody thought about his talk. And mostly I was excited because I was happy to be there. He really wasn't here on the West Coast a lot. And honestly, I had read that morning specifically, I don't know how or why, by some serendipity. I read Margaret Atwood's take on her own work on The Handmaid's Tale, and I remember when I read that when I was really young, I was terrified of the book. I was like, shit, man, this is crazy what happens to women. But what she said was that I didn't write anything that hadn't already happened, that wasn't already reality. And I was like, shit, she's right. That's so scary, but it's true. It happens in our society a lot consistently, you know? And so what one of the women was like, well, I want to know what you think. What did you think? Because we were discussing the misogyny question actually before we went in and afterwards. And she's like, well, what were you guys discussing? And I said, no, I actually felt like what he said was right. I said, representation isn't approbation. And also, I felt like the book is really consistent in sort of representing, people in my neighborhood, because that's how men think. That's sort of the reality. But as I was saying this, she was getting really angry with me. One of the women, she was like, like she was really angry already with Junot Diaz, what he had actually said about, that representation was not approbation, and the discussion that followed after my take, because as she was saying that, I was getting really intimidated and really nervous, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to really say anything, because obviously I'm on the losing side here. I'm not saying what she wants to hear. And I was, I was feeling really shut down because everybody else was like, oh yeah, he could have done much better, and he has a responsibility, and this and that. And I was just like thinking to myself, as they were like agreeing amongst themselves, and I was feeling shut down, was that, well, yeah, there is misogyny, but I was thinking, it's not like it's not there. The last 2 days before the day of that I went to see Junot Diaz talk, I was enthralled by the Pope's visit. And not enthralled by him himself, I was curious, But it was interesting to notice that there was just a bunch of men. All the men in the church hierarchy are men. It was such a male dominance. All the men in Congress are mostly men. They're making decisions about women, not just in the nation, not just in a religion, but I was just like thinking it was just an irony, I was there in this talk and I was like, yeah, misogyny is like a reality. I was like thinking to myself, it's like we're knee deep in it, patriarchy, misogyny is clearly there. And I was like thinking, like these women are getting angry with me, but they're already angry with Junot Diaz. And it's like, he's just merely giving an authentic voice actually to something that's real, and not that it deserves or I don't know what deserves and what doesn't, but and I'm pretty sure he wrestles with these questions himself as an author about the misogyny in his books. But at the end of the day, it's like, this is what a Dominican brother thinks. He's thinking to myself, what am I gonna do? And I think that's why his books are so successful, because it's not just in New Jersey that's happening, that Dominicans, or in New York or wherever it is. It's not just, there that's happening. It's happening here in my neighborhood, my working class neighborhood. How do you get men to think otherwise? And one of the things that I was thinking to myself, well, I'm actually glad that they're there, because it exposes that thought process, something that I already think is going on in men's head. But after we expose it, what do we think? Because at the end of the day, patriarchy, misogyny, and any of those things of that equation, we're all on the losing side. Nobody wins, I was thinking, and nobody won in that conversation. And I had to actually leave and step out, and because I just felt they were so angry with him, and they were so angry at misogyny itself, that, I wasn't even being heard, because they thought I was approving misogyny itself, that I was approving. But I was like, no, that's the reality. And how can we move from there? And it's a painful reality, actually, because I see it all the time. I see it within my family, I see it in my neighborhood. I mean, how do you get men to actually pay child support that they don't want to pay? It's not like they come and ask me, hey Sonia, what do you think, should I pay child support or not? You're the feminist, you're the woman, what's your take on this? They don't say that. They go to their homies and they're like, no, that bitch, that hoe, I'm not gonna pay her, I'm not gonna give her any money, blah 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 blah. That's the reality. Even though the state does its best to enforce these things, that's the reality. And to me, it's like we're all in this losing game. And I felt like when we were having the conversation, they forgot one of the main messages is how to be gentle and generous with yourself. But I felt that we should also be gentle and generous with others in order to have solidarity and not to be angry and to actually look at what's happening. And that's essentially what I felt, that. And I did leave really quickly because I felt like they almost physically, like both the women that weren't agreeing me, turned from me, they turned their backs on me. And I felt like this really sucks. I wasn't, you know what I mean? To me, it was more like, no, it's a painful reality and it sucks. And I feel that we need to do better. But it's not just me. And this is one of the things that I actually did disagree with Junot Diaz. I agree with mostly everything he said except this one thing. He said, well, there's feminists out here in the audience. Why don't we ask them? I'm like, no. It's not up to feminists to answer every question, every response to every social movement that's taking place. It's up to men to actually start stepping up. Beginning with the fact that right now we have the Planned Parenthood issue. It would be nice if it wasn't just women, but also men that saw it not just an issue for women. And this is what I don't like about all these issues. Oh, it's a women's issue. No, it's up to men to actually step up and say that women have a right to good health care. And it's up to men to stand up right now. Currently in Maine, some mayor wants to post people's addresses that are on welfare and on WIC. It's up to men to say, no, that's a privacy issue. No, you don't have a right to put a scarlet letter on families who are on WIC and on government support. Because nobody understands that this economy is too weak. This economy, this capitalism that we have isn't really functioning for us. And it's leaving a lot of families impoverished. Nobody says, everybody looks at that as a woman issue, and it's not a woman's issue. It's a human issue. And that's the thing that actually I was upset about. And I wasn't really necessarily upset about, because I think we need to have compassion for even Junot Diaz and even the characters in the book, and even for us, is that it's everybody's problem to be solved and not just women. Anyways, I'm sorry that this is really lengthy. There was just a lot of food for thought in Junot Diaz's talk, and apologies. Have a great day. Bye. And be gentle and generous with yourself and kind. That's a good panzazo methodology. Anyways,